The visceral fat, I want to labor on this a little bit. I think there's still a slight misunderstanding or confusion around visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. So subcutaneous fat is that soft, pinchable fat, often found more in women than in men. And visceral fat is the fat that lines the organs, which is the dangerous fat, right? But it's also the fat that's most amenable to loss via diet and exercise. Subcutaneous fat can be a little bit more stubborn. So there are two different types. Now, visceral fat is an indication or a precursor for disease. The visceral fat is basically the fat around the abdomen. If your waistline is more than 104 centimeters, then that is one of the signs for us that this patient may be at risk of developing diabetes. We call it pre-diabetic. Because it indicates that there is this excess storage of fat. And actually, it's probably a lifestyle. You're seeing it now when you're 40, but actually this started in your childhood when your routine was eating a lot, even if it's little but often, or having unhealthy foods. And so you have this constant sugar attack, which, from a dental perspective is bad for your teeth, but from a body perspective results in this hormonal cascade. So you're eating, your body takes that sugar, you get this insulin spike. And if that is happening all day, every day, eventually the receptors to insulin go, actually, this is a bit too much for me. So they start to switch off and almost like the boy who cried wolf, they just stop responding. And then you have this insulin resistance that we speak about. And then you don't have the normal fat regulation. So you get excess fat being stored in these fat cells. So visceral fat is something that people need to understand is not an aesthetic issue, or not an aesthetic issue alone. It is a health issue. It predisposes to a huge number of chronic disease. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the analogy I think of is, you've got an overstuffed pantry and then you try and put more in and it just starts to accumulate on the outside. And you think about, like you mentioned, glucose. The reason that ends up with visceral fat is your body, your liver converts the glucose into fat, into triglycerides. And then they're supposed to be stored into your subcutaneous fat, your adipose tissue, but there's nowhere for it to go. So it just gets left. And a lot of it gets left around the liver itself. And what that means is you've got high circulating levels of triglycerides, and high circulating levels of fat in your blood generally. So hyperlipidemia becomes an issue. And if you think about cardiometabolic health, so cardiovascular system is at risk. You're at risk of developing blood clots and hardening of the arteries and your blood vessels because of this excess fat around. But also in terms of diabetes, that the excess glucose itself is like sandpaper rubbing against the insides of your blood vessels. So what that does is it creates gaps for the fat to stick to, and then you get your developmental plaques. So you've got a really difficult situation that puts you gradually more and more at risk of developing severe complication from your health. So it's the diabetes itself isn't what causes the problem. It's the complications of the diabetes that causes the problem. And like you said, it could be okay up until you get to your 40s and that accumulated damage starts to build. And it's like, well, we have to reverse that. We have to do something about it.
And can you reverse that?